Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Mark Abrams. I am the content manager and a mentor over at Puremix.net, and we're extremely excited about this one today. We are joined by Brian Moncarz and members of Our Lady Peace. So, how's it going, Brian?
Very good, Mark. Good to see you.
Awesome, cool. So Brian, we're with today Duncan and Jason.
What's up? Hey,
Cool.
Mark, how are you?
Doing good, doing good. So Jason, raise your hand so everybody knows who you are.
Out here.
Cool. And there's Duncan. So Jason plays drums and Duncan plays bass. And they were extremely kind to take some time out of their schedule and come and join us today, which is amazing. So um, you guys are all up in Canada together, right?
We are.
Awesome.
Canucks.
Yeah. So you're able to just kind of drive over to Brian's studio and join
Exactly.
in. That's
And
great.
then taking we the North for the last little while.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. So tell me what's going on with Our Lady Peace right now.
We're just sort of on a little mini break. We've been on tour with Live in Bush for a couple weeks this past month, and we're going back out kind of towards the end of July for a 6-7 week run with them.
Awesome. Very cool.
And we're
How
recording new music too.
nice. Oh, that's great. So you're working on a record right now?
Yeah, I mean we're probably 7 or 8 songs in.
Hmm.
One of which we hope to actually finish in time to get out for the second half of the tour.
Awesome.
And then we're looking at releasing a more full-length record next year.
That's great. Nice. So tell me a little bit about the dynamic of you guys. Since two of you are in Canada, and then are the other two in Los Angeles?
Yeah, the other two live in Los Angeles. And we kind of, the last few years, work in pairs, writing and then submitting ideas to each other. And we all have our own studios, so we kind of demo the songs on our own before we head in and actually start production.
Oh, that's awesome. Nice. Is there a lot of sending session files back and forth?
Yeah, a lot of WeTransfer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
In the last record that we had, it's called Something That's. There was even one of the songs Rain had written the sort of sketch for it, if you will, and then he'd send it to Jay and me to demo up, and we were not very precious about it, but there was something about those files that they loved, and we ended up keeping it, which was drums were recorded in his old rehearsal space. I recorded a bass direct into focused into a computer,
Yeah.
and it ended up being, don't think it was a single, but it's one of our favorite songs.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome. Well, cool. I definitely want to get into some more of that as we go here. So a little bit about how this is going to go. We're live right now and joined by a bunch of people in a live chat room. So chat room, how's it going? Thank you guys so much for joining us. Hope you guys are going to get loud in there and ask some good questions. So we just wrapped up the mixing contest for Drop Me in the Water on Puremix. And that was accompanied by Brian's video where he broke down and deconstructed that mix and kind of did some on-the-fly stuff and talked everybody through the process on that. So to start things off, I just want to say thank you very much to our sponsor for all of these shenanigans, and that is Sound Toys. Brian, huge fan of Sound Toys, as you can see in your video for Drop Me in the Water.
Absolutely.
So are we.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
We're big fans too.
Yeah, nice. What are your favorite plugins in there?
Oh, Crystallizer, big time.
Nice. Ooh.
I love the Echo Boy.
Yeah.
I love the Echo Boy, and the danger is loving Decapitator too much.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, radiator.
Especially when you go Decapitator Radiator.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian, you are the master of Decapitator in my eyes. It was so fun to watch on there. Yeah. Yeah, it's radiating the decapitator and then decapitating the radiator.
Yeah,
It's the fun part. It's the fun
exactly.
part. Nice. Well, cool. Let's jump right in for the mixing contest, people. So we'll kind of go down the line here. We had I think it was 176 submissions or something like that. So that's a lot of mixes to go through. And the way that we kind of do it, Brian is super busy mixing records, and it's hard to get through that many. So what we do is Fab has trained his engineers at Flux to listen to a bunch of the mixes, and they go through with a certain set of criteria, and we pare that down to the top 10 mixes. Those mixes are then sent on to the mentor, who has his own way of listening and things that he's looking for, and he kind of goes through and he chooses the top three, because we like to give away prizes with these things. So one thing to remember about the mixing contest, we say this every time, but it's really important. Uh, the goal of these things is not necessarily all about winning or like, who's a better mixer. So many of these things are subjective, obviously. So the point of doing these is really to get the practice, and it's just such an amazing opportunity to get tracks from a band like Our Lady Peace that are, you can hear how these things are recorded in a studio like Jackson Brown's Groove Masters, and then get to work with those tracks in your own DAW and apply the mixing techniques that you see in the video. So the important part about this is to go through the motions and the practice of that. And then the benefit is that on the site, you can listen to your mix compared to the other, 175 mixes that came in, and kind of see where other people took it. And those things aren't necessarily right or wrong. They're just different. And maybe you can learn something from what somebody else did or their particular view on it. So all of that to say that we do have a top 3 picks for prizes from Sound Toys. So let's get into it. We'll start with the third place one, and the third place winner is going to receive Little Altar Boy. So that's a super fun one. Do you guys mess with that?
I've definitely messed with it many times.
Yeah. Awesome.
Harmonize things and get a little crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely fun. Cool. So let's get to it. Our third place winner, it's always fun to pronounce the usernames, is Otlib. So Otlib, congratulations. You're going to win the Sound Toys Little Altar Boy. Nice. So Brian, did you have any notes on that one?
Yeah, I thought, it was a nice overall balance. Great overall energy. If there was something that I would nitpick over, it was the sound of the toms. I felt were a little bit thin.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's good, there's some good point in the toms, but also I'd like to hear the richness there. There's a lot of tom fills in the song, and some epic tom fills by Jason. Yeah. So, I want to hear it nice and full. That's what I was looking for there. Nice. But great energy.
Awesome. What are some tricks that he could do to kind of fatten those up?
It sounded to me like he had filtered out a lot of bottom. I would have just I tend to leave toms alone unless they're like super subby or something. I might filter out below 60 or 80. Mm-hmm. I might also scoop some low mids out if it needs that, and leave sort of the point and leave some of the stuff that's in and around 80 to 100 hertz. Yeah. So it just sounds beefy. I mean, I think, like I said in the video, so much of Our Lady Peace, and when I was mixing, I focused a lot on the rhythm section because it's such a huge part of the band. Yeah. So the definition in the drums is something that's very important.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, congratulations again, Otlib. So moving on to second place here. Our second place winner is going to win the Mighty Decapitator.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. There it is.
Awesome. All right. So I really need to get a drum roll for these. I think I say that every time. So our second place winner. Yes. Wait, we have a drummer. Yeah. All right. Cool. So our second place winner is, this one's fun to say, Lori Hackignan. It's part of the fun is pronouncing these. So congratulations. I'll just call you Lori for now. Congratulations. You just won a Sound Toys Decapitator. So Brian, how'd you feel about that mix?
I thought of the mixes I heard, it was probably one of the most creative mixes. Lori definitely, spent some time automating effects and levels, and I thought it was done really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the dynamics mix, I think, sort of held true to what the song needed.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then I think just overall, the whole mix could have used a little bit more bottom end on the mix bus, just a little bit.
Cool. Yeah.
But it was a really, really fantastic mix.
Nice. You have quite a few really fun two-bus processing techniques. Uh, Anybody who's seen the video, Brian has a technique where he has this chain that he calls the A bus, and then he's got another one called the B bus, and you choose between those based on the song, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes even on a record, I'll switch them up depending on how the song was recorded and what I think it needs.
Yeah. 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 And there's a ton of stuff about that. The one thing I forgot to mention, this Q&A is open to the entire public. So we probably have a lot of people here that aren't Puremix subscribers and might not have seen the video yet. But there are excerpts from that video that I believe demonstrate that process on YouTube. So you guys can search some more, and we actually have some articles on the site as well that are free to read. So if you're not a subscriber, you can go and check some of that stuff out too. So with the low end thing on her mix, is that something that you might have dealt with on the mix bus, or was it something you were hearing on individual tracks?
I usually will deal with that on the mix bus because it sounded to me like it was an overall thing. It wasn't like I needed to boost the bottom on the kick and the bottom on on like the bass amp. It was more of an overall vibe. It just felt a little thin.
Yeah.
So definitely something, I mean, I have, there's multiple ways on my mix bus that I can address those types of issues.
Yeah.
I take a look at the Pultec, which I usually have set to 100 hertz, or the Manly Massive Passive, which does so much for my mixes. So
yeah.
I would probably take a look at the Massive Passive in that situation and just sort of, tweak the low mids usually to kind of bring a bit of fullness if it's missing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, that's great. So, again, congratulations, Lori. You just won a decapitator. So cool. All right. So on to first place, the big one. And our first place winner is going to win the entire Sound Toys 5 bundle. So that includes effect rack and everything else. Super fun.
Yeah.
And our first place winner is Robert Morgan. Congratulations, Robert. You just won the Sound Toys 5 bundle. Cool. All right. So what jumped out at you for this one?
I thought he nailed the vocal sound right away. As soon as the Rain's vocal came in, it was like, yeah, that's it. It's there. Obviously that's an important element. I thought that it had great energy in the rhythm section. There was good definition in Jason and Duncan's parts and how they interacted with one another. A little minute criticism would be I'd like to hear a little bit more of the falsetto harmonies in the second halves of the choruses. I know when I mixed it, Rain called me and he was like loud and proud with those backing vocals. He's always nice. So they were a little quiet, and I think we used that to really lift the second half of the choruses, which was an interesting dynamic shift from the first half of the choruses. So
yeah,
that would be my one sort of criticism. But overall, it was very high energy and
awesome.
It felt right.
Yeah, very cool. Rain's falsetto is so unique too. That's one of his kind of calling cards. I feel like his voice is super interesting.
For a while.
Really? Yeah.
You got away with it for a little bit. So to have it come back into this song in a real meaningful way, we all talked about the need for it to be loud and proud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Very cool. So let's see. So that is our 3 top winners, and then I want to just give a quick shout out to the other 7 in that top 10. So pretty fun thing here for the subscribers that have been doing some of these. We're going to see some pretty familiar names on here. So honorable mentions go to Delmar Sound Recording, Calvert 303, Clown, as I call him in past broadcasts. He's been on here before on this list. KLWN. So he's won a couple before, and he made it in the top 10 on this one. Jay Boris, Colton Lee 3, who actually won our last contest. Arc Records, and Person 71. So congratulations to you guys. You all made it into the top 10 and had some great mixes on there. So, Brian, when you were listening through, like, did you have any other, thoughts on any of those, or was it kind of fun to like listen to other people's mixes on this?
It is. It's a lot of. To me, it's always interesting to hear, what a different set of ears will bring to a mix, because everyone mixes different. I mean, I think that's what's so beautiful about the whole creative process. Mm-hmm. I would say, just as a whole, I was missing some automation. I think I would have liked to have heard a little more dynamic shifting going on in terms of levels, like when choruses hit, and I think that's a big one. Making sure that Rain's vocal still jumps out and it doesn't stay at the same level as the verse.
Yeah,
the bigger the tones come in. That was sort of a big thing throughout, but I thought everyone did a great job in its top 10. It wasn't an easy selection.
Right. Yeah, these are always pretty hard. So, well, cool. Yeah, so let's chat about the song a little bit, about the recording of it. So yeah, so you guys, Brian mentioned that you guys were at Jackson Brown's studio, right?
Yep, we were. Nice. We'd gone together for I basically like a 3-day get together. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the tough thing about us being over here and them being in LA. And we wanted to, I forget how many songs we wanted to get, but that was, I think we recorded 3 songs maybe in that session. Mm-hmm. And we walked into Jackson's place that it hadn't been renovated at that point. I think it since has, and it's really tough to get in there. You have to be a friend of a friend type thing. Right. And we were with a producer friend of ours, Jason Later, and he knew the guys there. We got in, and it was like a club. I think Jackson sort of used it as his storage for their live gear. And you walk into this really unassuming, rather big space in Santa Monica. And I walked in, and first thing I saw was this beautiful, massive Neve board.
Yeah.
And in the corner, can't remember, but there had to have been a minimum of 3 to 4 Fairchilds. And then my favorite thing as a bass player, which is an RCA BA6A. I don't know how many of those he has, but when I walk into a studio and see one of those, that's just, I'm done.
Yeah.
And we recorded largely off the floor. And, I'd been coming from a ski trip, I have to admit, so I was just happy to have everything intact.
Right.
And, I showed up to the session with a set of skis, and that was about it, right? So I borrowed Steve's, I think it's an early 70s, mid 70s Fender P bass that someone had burned originally, I think, to make it look cool. And
nice.
There are things like an Anchor. It's so heavy. It's not like my 63, which is probably 7 or 8 pounds, but we just plugged it in, and I know that I personally used, for one of the only times I've used a B15 Ampeg flip top, because it's Jackson, one of the things he had there. And then of course I know that there's at least one RCA in the chain. I think a Fairchild may have been in the chain. And those things, when you're playing with those really vintage compressors, there's a sound that you get that I'm not sure you get in the box. Maybe you do, but I haven't had that experience. But they react differently, and it just makes you play ever so slightly differently.
Yeah.
And just talk about what he was playing.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't really remember mic-wise, but actually they had some old school RCA
up on top,
stuff like that. But it was the DW Jazz Series kit. I used a brand new catchy Yamaha Signature Series snare that they don't even make anymore. Those things are a secret weapon. I don't know if you've gotten into those, but they're amazing. Yeah, I think I've owned like 6 of those in my life. I don't own any of them anymore. But like Duncan said, we did it like live off the floor all together. You were like 10 feet away from me.
Yeah, and we kept all those tracks. I think we may have kept one of Steve's body guitars,
Yeah.
and then they overdubbed the other stuff later. But I know that the drums and bass were fully live off the floor.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Mistake at all.
Yeah. That's great. Did you guys have Rain in the room with you as well?
It was in a vocal booth off the side, but it was all glass walls, so we could all like have eye contact.
Yeah.
And we didn't end up keeping his vocal because he has a pretty specific chain that he likes at home
Mm-hmm.
that I'm probably not allowed to talk about because he likes to keep that secret. I can tell you,
Nice.
you're a Corby. But
She has mounted to his console.
yeah, he has a Corby.
does.
Corby mounted to his with. I don't know because it has multiple diaphragms, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one he has set up. But anyway,
Mhm.
but there's something just inherently good about keeping the tracks from the initial recording where you're feeling the energy for the first time, and it just felt so good that we kept a lot of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes through in the track too. It feels very natural and live off the floor, exactly like that. So I think that this is the second video that we've had on the platform now that was recorded out of there. Fab DuPont, Fab, who started Puremix, recorded not the most recent, but the one before, the David Crosby record there.
Oh,
So-
no way.
Yeah, so Michael League produced it, and they wanted to work out of that studio, so they went and did it out of there. So it's kind of cool because this is like another story coming out of Jackson Brown's place.
That's fun.
Pretty fun.
And a second, David Crosby. No, I'm sorry. That's Steven Stills. I'm thinking Stills. We recorded an album years ago at Westlake or one of those places in LA, and Stills was in the room next door.
Oh man, crazy. Definitely a certain energy when a presence like that is in the building.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, let's pause from there for a second. Let's do a question from our live room. So this one comes from Alberto, and he says, in Missing Pieces from Somethingness, the verse...
All right.
Oh, the verse vocal is a great example of edge and balls without fear to be too much. What's Brian's approach to vocal distortion? Thanks.
There you go. Missing Pieces. So that was the last song we mixed.
It was.
Yeah, that was. I remember it was like in January or something. We had to get it out quick. So, what is my approach to vocal distortion? Yeah, well, I mean, you've hopefully watched the video. I love distortion on the voice. I try to set it up in a way where, as a vocalist gets a little bit more aggressive, the distortion will kick in, almost like we're running through an old, tube pre or tube console, so that it's not just like super distorted. I mean, that song in particular, and Rain's vocal was quite dynamic, and there's definitely some like prettier moments and some more aggressive moments. So I tried to sort of set it up like that, and it's usually either I'll choose the decapitator or the radiator. Sometimes I use the Fab filter. Is it the Saturn?
Yeah.
That one's pretty cool too. But if I'm kind of going after the old tube stuff, it might be the radiator. I'd have to go back and look at the session. I can't remember what I used specifically on that. And oftentimes too, I'll change it up from verse to chorus. So I might have my verse on one track, and I'll have my chorus on another track with a different set of distortion on it. I almost always have the distortion right as an insert. I mean, technically in parallel because I utilize the mix function on plugins, but it's inserted right there. Sometimes I'll get if I feel like the lead vocal needs a bit of grit, but I want to leave it clean, I'll sometimes distort like a slap back in behind it and get that happening, so it kind of thickens the voice and adds a little bit of distortion that you sort of perceive in the back of the mix, as opposed to like right out in front. But yeah, that's how I like to handle distortion on. Well, because I think like you could look at all my mixes, and I don't think you ever find a mix that I've worked on that doesn't have one of those three distortion plugins on it. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I think it's definitely one of my favorite things about your style of mixing is your creative use of distortion. And my mixes may be sounding more distorted these days since we shot that video.
I mean, you have to, I think you have to be careful because you can I definitely have submitted mixes where I'll get the like, I think it's a little bit too crunchy on the vocal. But, I mean, I like to push the limits, and I think the distortion sort of tickles your ears. But what I love about Decapitator specifically is that you can use it as an EQ as well. Like if you want to tame some of the sizzle in the top end, you can do that while you're adding distortion. There's a lot when you delve into that plugin. There's a lot that it can do outside of distortion, which I think is really
right. Yeah, the filters are very useful for that too.
Totally.
Yeah, great plugin. Okay, so let's do one of the pre-submitted questions, and this one comes from Gabriel Towson from Maryland. And he says, can you share your philosophy on how you blend all of your shared parallel compression into the mix? Is there something specific that you're listening or looking for as you're kind of bringing those up? And his question was a little bit longer. I had to kind of trim it for the graphic, but he was specifically wondering about how you're maintaining your balances, and when you're setting the balances of the mix, are you using the parallel compression to do that? So, philosophy on parallel compression.
I mean, I introduced the parallel buses very early in the process. Lately, I've been, sort of importing from my template all of my parallel buses. So on the drums, if you've seen either one of the videos there, I've got 4 or 5 that I like that I don't always use, but I'll use a combination of them depending on what I think the tracks need. But I usually will send to my parallel buses before I even start EQing and compressing on individual tracks, because right away I'll get an idea of how my parallel buses are interacting with the material. I rarely change the settings on my parallel buses. They usually stay the same. Sometimes if I have to tame some top end, if the cymbals are kind of sizzly, I might, my Studer bus, I might just take the sort of HF down a little bit on that plugin, just to kind of counteract. So I usually, I'll blend that stuff in almost right away. And then I'll go and start EQing. So it becomes a big part of my mix, just like, mixing through my mix bus from the start.
Yeah.
And then there's some mixes where the source material ends up kind of being louder than the parallel. Usually it ends up that way, but sometimes it happens that the parallel ends up just being a little bit louder than the source material. And it's just, on that given day, that's what the mix kind of needed. But there's no, there's no way that I always work. It just happens organically. But I've just sort of found a system of parallel buses that I love. I love the combination of, and they all do different things, and they do them well.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. So when you're starting to blend those things in, what are some of the characteristics that you're listening for?
A lot of times it's sort of the bigness that I'm hoping to get out, like the fullness. So that Studer bus that I have that sometimes has a decapitator after it and sometimes not. Sometimes a little EQ, sometimes not. You'll see it on the template video. That one I use just to get some weight in the drums. Because I'm mixing tons of rock music, I find that, when you start adding big guitars, no matter what you do, how you handle EQing your drums, the tones always seem to disappear every time I have this like massive stack of guitars on the left and the right. Yeah. So for me to kind of like counteract that, the parallel buses kind of make the drums seem a little bit more larger than life. Almost like if you were, in a club and watching, an arena and hearing the kick drum, through the PA.
Yeah. So
the computer does that for me. And then the Omnipressor bus gives me like a lot of crunch, like more lo-fi. So if I want to, make the drum kit a little scrappier or have the snare drum kind of stick out a little bit more, I'll use that, and then the cymbals will go through the stereo, the 1176 stereo bus, and then I've been using that Wolfpack one, the sort of lo-fi, the Wolf comp or whatever it is, to get if I need like super lo-fi cymbals and rooms, then I'll blend those in, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I'm usually in drums. That's what I'm looking for. In guitars, again, it's just an added weight. There's something like if I take the parallel buses out of a mix, it just sounds thin to me. And I mean, these are things that I did do when I was on an analog console, but it just wasn't as easy to do, with the gear that I had at that time. I mean, that's like over 10 years ago. Yeah. But definitely had like a parallel drum bus with like a tube compressor and some EQ and parallel vocals. And it's just a concept that I've been really interested in. And having the ability to sort of leave the transients alone on the source material too, if you want, which I think, which is really cool. So you kind of have the tracks speaking the way they were meant to speak,
right?
And then you're kind of taming it a little bit with the parallel. If that's what you're going after. Sometimes it's more distortion. Sometimes it's flange. I don't know. Whatever you want to put in.
Yeah.
It's exciting to me because what it does too, in my mind, as soon as I start running all the tracks to the parallel buses, my mix starts sounding like my mix. And right away, like within the first hour of the mix, it's exciting to me. It just sounds great. And then I can dive in and fine tune.
Right. But, yeah. So you're doing multiple things then. I mean, you're looking for like a creative kind of push and adding density and EQ and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
I mean, if you sat and watched me mix, it's a huge part of my mixing process.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's ask you guys a question. When you get a mix back from Brian, what are you guys kind of listening for? What are some of the first things that you kind of want to hear come back to you to react to?
Well, I can speak to Drop Me in the Water specifically because that was the first thing you mixed for us, right?
No,
it wasn't.
Hiding Place for Hearts was the first one, which was an oddball. I remember because like not a ton of live drums. Well, and then Drop Me in the Water.
So I remember hearing Drop, and all of us sort of hearing Drop and like, oh man, is it ever distorted?
All the time,
right? But I remember specifically having a conversation as a band especially with Rain, because he's done a lot of mixing himself back in the day, and saying, but I love the excitement. Like maybe we just need to hone this in a bit, but there's an excitement here that we haven't had in a little while. Yeah. And we were all really, really excited about that. Yeah. And it took the song that we knew had a great life to it, and it just made it jump out of the speakers a little bit.
Right.
And that was the thing that initially really sort of, I don't know, led us to having this sort of long-standing relationship now with Brian that I see going on for a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Brian, there's that thing that you talked about in your interviews about like you send it out, and you're like hearing it back, and oh, it's distorted. Live with it for a few days.
And I specifically remember because Rain sent me the files at and I think I got them at like 5 or 6 at night, and I had seen the band play it live, so I knew the song. I was like excited to get going on it, and I told myself, I'm not gonna mix this tonight. I'm just gonna prep it. So I got it up on my system, and then I'll go home and sleep and mix it in the morning. And the next thing I knew, it was the morning, and I had mixed the whole thing. And normally I would never do this, but I felt so good about it that I just hit send at like 5 a.m.
Oh, it's amazing.
And then I had like buyer's remorse. Shit, why did I do
That's awesome.
Why did I do that? It's so weird. But
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. But that first like initial reaction, that's cool. So you mixed all the way through the night, basically.
I literally mixed through the night and came home as the sun was coming up.
Yeah.
Which, let's see. I mean, it spoke like that song really connected with me. It was just such a, I mean, it's such an impactful, high energy, like everything about it, the bridge, the cool breakdown. It just like that's a mixer's dream.
Right.
That kind of song with those dynamics and the playing and the energy and the vocal sounds like. So it was just one of those, I couldn't leave it.
Yeah.
And I totally lost track at the time. I had no idea. My old studio had no windows, so I had no idea. Could have been 2 PM or 2 AM. It didn't really matter.
Right.
That was
Full casino vibe.
Totally.
Yeah.
Full
Yeah.
casino.
Exactly.
Full
Nice.
casino vibe.
Awesome. So that it does take a kind of left turn in the bridge there, which is pretty fun, all the way through the end of the tune. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we just kind of felt like, and we do sometimes maybe overuse breakdowns as a band. But at least if you go back through our catalog, we could probably be accused of that.
Yeah.
But it felt like this song had such a heavy hammer to it that it needed a little break in the middle of it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and it was a great time to have a Steve guitar lick, re-intro that last chorus, that moment where you don't often think when you're writing songs about what it's going to look like on stage, but every once in a while you go, oh yeah, that's going to be a great spotlight moment, right?
Yeah.
And Brian just amplified that.
Nice. There's I found a video on YouTube. It was an early performance of the song, and that riff that comes in at the end that sort of just like really drives it through to the end of it. That riff, I think the guitar player was playing during the chorus on that one. So
Yeah.
So it might have been a really good one.
We awful. So that lick, that riff came a little bit later, and we always knew where there was a semblance of that riff when we first recorded the song. He hadn't just quite honed it in yet. And then we tried having that through the chorus, and then we just felt like it was, as a whole, was going to distract from the vocal too much.
Mm-hmm.
And it was better to just leave it in that spotlight section.
That's awesome. Yeah, it came together really well. So what was the demo process like for that? I mean, before you guys actually got to Jackson Browne's place, how many iterations kind of went back and forth with the band? And
a couple. It started off right around the time that you joined the. Yeah, Jeremy, our old drummer, had left the band,
mm-hmm.
and then I went down for a writing session with Rain and Steve,
mm-hmm.
which we'd never done as a threesome before, and we came up with a sort of a good sketch of what the song was going to be, and then once it was clear to us that Jay was going to be a longtime member of this band and a big contributor, from songwriting to playing live to just being 4 equal pillars, if you will, for lack of a better metaphor. Mm-hmm. We knocked around with him, and it sort of began to take a more focused shape. So I'd say 2 really good. Then 2 sort of demo versions. Then we brought Jason later in, our producer, and he twisted it as he will, and then we just went and recorded it. So, but the timing between the last one, when the producer was involved, to recording it was really short. So it was really fresh and really exciting at that point.
Yeah, feels that way. Very cool. Let's do another pre-submitted question, and this one comes from. I'm gonna try and say it right here. This is from Go Ishikawa from Tokyo, Japan. And he says, "Thank you for the opportunity to experience mixing a great song along with your tutorial. I find very little tutorials on panning instruments in the sound field, and often hear professional mixers commenting that they place any instrument either in the middle, the full left, or right, so LCR panning. I'd appreciate if you could share your thoughts on panning."
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure in drumming, if I can remember, I'm probably pretty hard left and right with guitars.
Mm-hmm.
I try to balance things out, though. I think in Drop Me in the Water, there's, if I'm not mistaken, there's 1 guitar in the verse that's sort of more to the left. But it sort of gets balanced out with hi-hats, and I know in the second verse there's some synths. So I'm not afraid to, I want everything to be heard. You know, I don't want to put that guitar in the center because that's going to interfere with the kick, snare, and Duncan's bass.
Yeah.
So throwing it to the left allows me to put a fair amount of bottom on that guitar, make it nice and rich and full without it interfering with anything going on in the center channel. There will be reverb. Sometimes I'll use stereo verb so that you get a little bit of room sound off the guitar on the right-hand side. So it won't be perceived to the listener as fully left. But a lot of times, I mean, I'm a huge fan of left, center, right. I mean, I you know, but I do like to put things in between. Sometimes I won't pan drums 100% out. I might do 75 or 80. I can't remember on Drop Me in the Water if that's what I did. If it's like a big sort of classic rock leaning song, I'll usually put the drums in at about 70% and then leave space for the guitars.
Yeah.
But other times I'll go 100% with the drums and even pan the toms, you know, the rack 100% to the right and the floor 100% to the left, just because it sounds like in headphones. You know, it's really exciting, right? Yeah. You know, I'll use a Widener.
Which way do you pan them? Do you pan them from the perspective of the drummer? Or the guy?
I do audience perspective only for the fact that I worked with Bob Ezra for a little while, and he was very much an audience perspective guy. And I remember panning drummer's perspective one day, and he wasn't happy with that. As Bob can get. So, you know, he basically told me we're not making records for drummers, and drummers are the only people that will understand drummers' perspective. Perspective, and that made sense to me. And I just sort of like, I guess part of me every time I do a mix is just waiting to get yelled at. So I just go on it.
Yeah, right. Jason, what do you prefer on records when you listen?
Oh, audience.
Audience.
Yeah. You do?
I like drummer
But
perspective.
you stand next to
That's what
or in front of a drummer every day.
Well, I love to play the drums too. So.
Right there, you
go. Man, Duncan, I'm with you. I always go drummer's perspective until somebody yells at me, like you said, Brian. Yeah. But yeah, I love that topic for some reason. It's kind of a basic one, and it's been talked about so much, but it's always fun to me to hear like everybody's perspective on that. So, because I'm definitely a drummer's perspective guy, but Bob's right. So.
I think the tracks were sent to me in drummer's perspective.
Yeah, probably.
So I quickly changed that. But
yeah. I think maybe part of it too is I always, you know, when I'm labeling input sheet or something, I always do that from a drummer's perspective way, because I'm thinking about the drummer sitting at the kit. So maybe that's part of it, is just like the whole engineering thing, and then it helps me keep things straight when I'm in the live room trying to figure out where the overhead left is patched or whatever. So yeah, totally. Could be part of that, but engineer nerd thing. Okay, let's do another one from the live room, and let's see. So Paul Lucas asks, do you use reference tracks, and if so, what songs are your favorite?
That's a good one. I actually do use reference tracks a lot. I just recently moved studios about, I guess, 6 months ago now. So that, like, to kind of get to know a room, I'll use it. It's usually never anything I've worked on. I use it to judge the bottom end usually, and how far I can push. If you've watched my videos, I'm a massive fan of Chad Blake, so I usually reference one of Chad's mixes. There's a song by Cage the Elephant that he mixed called Trouble, which is just, in my opinion, one of the most stunning mixes of the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way that mix sounds, so I'll reference that. It's not very aggressive though. So, some Black Keys stuff, even on the more aggressive rock things that I'm mixing, just because the bottom end is so tight on those records. Yeah. They sound really good. And sometimes maybe it's a little bit more genre specific, where I might, reference something that's on the radio that, might help in some of my decision making. I don't, I sort of set up my mix, get it to a point where I'm excited about it, and then I'll start referencing. It doesn't necessarily happen right away. Yeah. And then there's, I just worked on a bunch of mixes for a band where we were referencing physical graffiti, and from example, and normally I don't go back to older stuff because, I always want to put kind of a modern spin on it, but it was important to the band that we sort of had to listen to that record again which was really interesting. It made the mixes turn out a little bit different than I would have thought.
Yeah.
And it actually made for a far more creative mixing session.
Yeah. Awesome. And
Yeah.
how about you guys? Do you when you're trying to communicate with the mixer, or even the writing process, maybe, do you guys ever supply reference mixes or say like, hey, this is the vibe that we're thinking about, or?
You can take that one.
I haven't submitted any reference mixes really. We do listen to music in the studio to try to capture vibes and kind of get direction for certain things, like tonally. Like if we want to push a song down a certain road, we'll listen to something similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, not so much for references. I kind of like to see what the mixer brings to the table when he submits.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did it, not to blow ourselves up, but why not? When we recorded the last batch of songs for Something Else, I remember we were looking for some specific clean tones and for some inspiration for some clean tones. And we spent a lot of time listening to Talk Talk.
Awesome.
Made famous by a No Doubt cover of "It's My Life," right? But delving more into the less known stuff, and I remember our producer asking us to really listen to some LCD Sound System a couple records ago, like just for rhythms and that kind of stuff. Not to lift anything specifically, but just maybe just look at things slightly differently.
Right. Yeah, it's awesome.
Like I remember Rain every once in a while would call me and say, listen to this particular song as an inspiration.
Yeah.
That, but it was never like it has to be like this. There was like maybe an idea or a vocal sound he was after or something.
Yeah.
Reference, but yeah.
Yeah.
They were really cool about letting me do my thing first.
That's
they
awesome.
didn't really want to interfere. They wanted to see what I would come up with.
Yeah. Dream client. It's awesome.
Yeah,
until
Right. Exactly.
Probably 23.
Right. Yeah.
I drive a lot of lunches.
Yeah. Nice. Did you say drop me in the water at 23?
No.
Oh, I was like, whoa.
I think the final one was like 11. No, maybe 8 or something. 7 or 8.
It was not double digits.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
No.
That's awesome.
No, but it was one of those things like we mixed it over time. So it was there was a lot of time to sit with mixes and listen to, batches of mixes against other batches of mixes and then sort of finally make changes on it. So
yeah,
I think when that happens, there'll be more changes. I mean, there wasn't the strict deadline pressure. So
yeah.
That's cool because I always say to my clients, I want it to be the best possible representation of the song. So if it takes a lot of recalls, then so be it. I mean, that's what we have to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not. It's not my song.
Yeah.
I've got a way that I like to mix, and I think I get hired for those specific things. But at the end of the day, like they walk out on stage and play it,
exactly.
and they have to be happy with it. So I'm happy to make as many revisions as it'll take.
Yeah. Awesome. So actually along that line, I know probably a lot of people are wondering this, a lot of the guys on the site we have everybody from people that are just starting out and they just want to mix their own record that they made in their bedroom, all the way up to Grammy winning guys that are watching the other Grammy winning guys to, get some inspiration. So I know like a lot of guys that are trying to dip their toe in professionally are wondering kind of, a band at your level, what are kind of some things that go into the decision-making process of choosing a mixer? How do you find somebody that you think might be a good fit for your record, and then how do you move forward with that?
I think it's sort of a multi-pronged answer, really.
Yeah.
I think you by listening, using your ears to the stuff you like, and then you delve deeper beyond the name on the record sleeve, or that's an old school way of saying it, but I realize. But, and then also producer recommendations. All of us tend to work with other people, so anything that we've experienced individually we bring back to the sort of collective and say, oh, this guy is great, or I've heard this guy, I've really admired his work before, let's try that.
Mm-hmm.
Through our producer Jason Later, we got to work a couple records ago with Andrew Sheps, and he was a wonderful guy to work with. And then I forget how your name came up originally, but it's I don't know, it's just a journey, and when you find someone who is has sort of a similar outlook towards the final product as you do, and for us, it's always been a real sort of an ethos of rolling up the sleeves and getting it done. If it's not right, we'll sometimes to our detriment continue down the rabbit hole to try and make it what we think it can be.
Yeah.
And a partner in crime like Brian, who was willing to do revisions and see the vision through and just be part of not us versus him, but us collectively, was a big important step in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right, let's do another one from the live room. This one comes from Paolo Milani, and he asks, going back to the panning question, what about panning keyboards in respect to other elements? So do you have a direct approach? Does it depend on the keyboard, or maybe specifically on the ones that drop me in the water?
Yeah, I think it'll just depend on. Usually I'll work unless it's like a keyboard-based song. I'll usually work the keys in kind of towards the end of the process. So a lot of times that's what I'll use to counterbalance, a guitar that might be on the left. Like in the second verse of Drop Me in the Water, there's some synths that sort of start percolating.
Yeah.
And I would have panned them a little bit to offset. But sometimes there's stereo effects on keys. If it's like a Leslie effect. So either I'll leave that stereo like left and right to some extent. It might not be 100% because that's where the guitars live. It could be like 50% or 60%. But sometimes I'll spread it out, but on like one side or the other side, so that you still get a little bit of movement there. Because a lot of times keys you like to use for movement, and then sometimes I don't know if there wasn't Draw Me in the Water. If there's a bass synth, sometimes you guys would do that.
Yeah, there might have been in the chorus.
Yeah. So a lot of times I'll pan that with the bass. Like I'll put it in the center, make it part of the bass tone, so it's not a separate thing. As long as it's tight, played tight, and makes sense and doesn't, create wonkiness on the bass track itself. And sometimes if it's a mono source, I might run it through a stereo reverb, so I'll still get a little bit of left and right. A lot of times I use keys for ambience and things, that I can kind of set in the back of the mix to add some depth, where because I'm mixing a lot of, rock bands, it's a lot of, drums, bass, loud guitars, all kind of screaming at you. So it's nice to have those elements that you can kind of put in the back of the mix, with some nice verb or delay and just sort of have living. But truthfully, it is sort of, I kind of pan things first, and then I'll even add the vocals, and then I'll go and sprinkle the keyboards in where they kind of fit in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things too about the mix of Drop Me in the Water, and really there's something in this record. I love the use of depth on that, and you can really kind of feel where the back wall is, especially when it moves into that bridge section. You can see down the mix, which is great.
Yeah, it's funny, I don't use a lot of reverb when I mix. It's usually like short stuff. So if ever I want to create some depth, as soon as I add like a longer plate or even a medium plate, you can hear it because my mixes are usually not watered down at all. So you can really hear it when I use it. Yeah. So and it doesn't happen all the time, but in the bridge of Drop Me in the Water, I mean, they sent some of those elements were printed. There was like already some delay, I think, or verb on Rain's vocal, one of the vocal tracks. I think there's some effects on the drum.
I played it that way, actually.
Oh, yeah, that's totally right. It was that's right.
Yeah, I played a delay, but I had towels over the snare and top.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
It's funny. I just always
thought it was like delay plug-in.
I thought it was like a triggered thing.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Wait, so tell us about that part a little bit.
Yeah, good.
Sorry, say that again.
Tell us about that.
Oh, the part. During the break, Jason later wanted kind of a scene change. So we threw some old towels over the snare drum and the floor tom, and I played my bass drum pattern on the floor tom and the delayed snare pattern with my left hand on the snare.
Yeah.
I actually played.
Look,
Yeah, that's all played.
because it like decays.
Oh, of course it
Yeah.
does.
It's built in.
Man, I could have sworn it was. I probably in the video. I probably even said that they put a delay on. That's funny.
There you go.
That's killer.
That's awesome.
Years of
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
super
so-
well done. You fooled the mixer. Cool. Okay, let's see. Let's do another one of the pre-submitted questions here. And this is cool. This comes from Luca P in Italy. He says, "Hi Brian, I'm a beginner in music production. I started playing guitar, same as you. Now I'm approaching to mixing techniques. Is it necessary working with a pro, or is it possible to become a pro alone using tutorials, studying, and doing a lot of exercises?" So he's wondering, to kind of grow his skill set. Can he do that by himself, or does he need to mentor with somebody? What are some of your tips of advice for somebody like that?
I mean, I think like that mentorship relationship that maybe happened in the past, they're sort of hard to come by these days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's necessarily the easiest thing. I mean, as our like the sort of larger studios shrinking, a lot of people working from their from home studios or renting smaller production rooms or whatever, it doesn't allow for the mentorship to happen. I mean, in my career, I was super fortunate to work with Bob Ezrin and David Bottrell, which definitely shaped a perspective on the way I work.
Mm-hmm.
But truthfully, when I started mixing in the box, I had sort of graduated on from working with those guys, and I kind of had to figure it out for myself. And to be 100% honest, I bought the Andrew Scheps Ziggy Marley tutorial and watched how he mixed in the box, because to me, I respect Andrew's work, and I knew that, maybe we shared some similar sensibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I've watched, countless tutorial because I like to learn. I don't really set in my ways in any kind of way. I like to keep learning. So I think in answer to his question, yeah, I think it would help to have a mentor. It would be great if he can find someone, that's doing great things wherever he's from, that he can like bounce mixes off of. I mean, that's the one thing I did with Bob that was so beneficial to my career. Was for like 6 months he listened to every mix I did and would critique it. And I learned, through trial and error, in his criticisms and praises, what I felt would be, sort of a good mix.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, and especially, I think like what you guys do at Puremix and, bands like OLP allowing listener or viewers to download the session files. I mean, I think that's insane. I mean, I never had that opportunity when I was younger. And I think you can learn so much, because a lot of learning comes from just how things should sound coming off the speakers.
Yeah.
When I worked with Bottrell, it always amazed me how good, when we were recording, how good things sounded and how clear. And once you start hearing those sounds, it's much easier to replicate those sounds. So, having that experience, through Puremix, I think is huge. So I think I think he would do okay by watching the tutorials and downloading and practicing. And I think the key really is to keep mixing. Always mix. Even if you're not busy as you're trying to transition into being a pro, just always mix. Because the only way you'll get better is by doing more.
Yeah, that the last part is really, really key too, which is another reason why the mixing contests are cool. But really, in general, it is a skill set. The same as, there's probably immeasurable amounts of hours that the two of you guys have spent on your instruments, getting to the point that you've gotten to, and it's no different for a mixing engineer. You have to put in the time and really learn the craft, and your instrument is the studio, and you have to put in the time. So.
Yeah.
Fab actually said something to me last weekend. He was talking about when people ask him kind of this same question, they'll say, something like, I've been at this for 5 years and I'm not there yet. And he's like, the good news is that you're about, maybe another 5 years until you get to the point that you start to like your mixes. And then from there, you're probably only about 10 years away. You're probably only 10 years away from when everything that you do, you're proud of or whatever. But point being, it's a really, really long journey and you just have to put in the time, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Let's do another one of the pre-submitted here. And this one comes from Pierre Gint Tarelton from Skong, Norway. And he says, first, I'd like to say that the song is a masterpiece. Very cool comment.
Thank you.
It's always cool to work with a band that performs so great. I was wondering, where did you record it? Small or big studio? Analog or digital? What mics were used on the drum set and the lead vocals? So we've already hit a lot of this stuff, but maybe we could talk a little bit more about, let's see. So it was all analog, right? We know that.
It was all analog. The room itself they weren't really super high ceilings, but
high up.
Yeah, sort of a 12-foot ceiling maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not cordoned off, and it was a really, really big room that had other stuff in it. So it wasn't, as I said previously, it was kind of like a clubhouse vibe, right?
Yeah.
The drums were in isolation. The bass amp and the guitar amp were in another room. Rain was singing in another room.
Mm-hmm.
It was a vintage Neve desk. It was every amazing piece of outboard gear that you could dream of they had. I'm not sure what all the chains were. To Jay's point, I think there was one of those great big old RCA broadcast mic. I think that was that was sort of like the middle room out in front, wasn't it?
I had an 87 way in the back spanked. And
Yeah.
I think the toms were 421s on
Yeah.
that session. Snare was just 57, but it's his his technique, Jason Later's miking technique with the snare that I've never seen. He has like the deepest incline on the snare mic. And it gets the tightest snare sound I've ever heard of. Yeah.
Huh.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Cool.
The bass was a collection of both DI and a little Ampeg flip top. And as I said before, the RCA, an RCA and a Fairchild, probably going through Neve preamps. But to sort of reflect back on what Brian was talking about, the last question too is it's one of the first times that we as a band would go in, you record a take, you go back in and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really the first time that we had that watershed moment of, all right, this doesn't sound like a recording. This sounds like a record.
Right.
Immediate, just off the floor, the way that those were. Now, obviously, what Brian took and did to it enhanced it tenfold, but it really sounded like a record. And I think it had a lot to do with the vibe of the room, the way Jason mic'd everything, and then the amazing analog gear that we were just fortunate to have our hands on.
Yeah. So you guys were very particular and intentional about getting the sound on the floor, and it's baked into the tracks. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's one of the things that also comes up in every single one of these from just guys who are doing such amazing work. It's the word intention just pops up over and over and over again, and it's starting all the way at the inception of the process and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Very cool. Let's do another one of the pre-submitted. This one comes from Paul Toth in Calgary, Alberta, and he says, it was a lot of fun to mix a portion of this really cool song. For Our Lady Peace, how involved are you in the mixing process, and do you sit in on any of the sessions? And then kind of already hit some of this too, but Brian, how many versions does it take to get to the final mix typically, and approximately how long to get a final mix? So how long do you spend on the mix? How many revisions? And
I think it's sort of, song specific. Right? We have sat in on the mixes in the past, traditionally way back into the 90s. We would sit in on the sessions sometime when the record company wouldn't pay for all of us to sit in. A couple of us would go and sit in. And with Brian,
you came the odd time to do things, but
yeah,
I think Rain kind of, because I think couldn't be there. I think wanted.
Yeah, but I forget why I went that one time.
We added some synths to something one time.
I played something. I opened up something.
And I think you just wanted to come in here. Like I think I think there was just, maybe it was a specific bass thing. Or
That's
you
right.
had some instructions from the rest of the band that it
Oh,
was just quicker to do
that's right, because I actually cheated. I took advantage of the digital technology, and I played a riff in the second verse that I really liked. But again, because it was essentially live off the floor, I had not thought to, because we recorded that outro. It was really fresh when we recorded the outro.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, actually, Steve had come up with the line, and then what I perceived to be the chords progression was not correct. So I'm actually playing different things than what he is, but it somehow works all together.
Yeah.
And one riff that I wish I'd repeated, so I came up with Brian and said, "Look, can you cut this in from there and put it at the end of the song?" But yeah, I always sat in the past, and we as a band, we definitely, I would say, we're involved in the mixing process, but from afar. We definitely have opinions. The same way for years and years, we've been. At the end of the day, your name goes on this, and unless you're in a situation like this, the average listener is not going to go, "Well, that mixer really missed that bit." It's why did the band do that, or why did the band let that go?
Yeah.
Same with artwork, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't anyway? But we are very. I say we're quite hands on in terms of we don't want to in terms of the final sign off, right? Because
Yeah.
it's something we have to live with, hopefully, for a very long period of time, that people want to continue listening to it. And Brian was amazing at accommodating us, and yet bringing his own vision to the project.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Brian, how long do you think a normal mix takes for you? Like, again, it's probably different every song, but
It depends. It depends on the material and what it is. I'd say like roughly maybe 12 hours.
yeah.
Like a full day. Usually, what I'll do is I'll mix all day, go home, come back the next morning, listen with fresh ears,
Mm-hmm.
and send it out to the client. But it'll vary. I mean, there's definitely songs I've worked on for 3 days just because it needed a lot of work.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I mix and I come back the next day and I listen to it and I'm like, wow, what was I thinking yesterday? And then I'll just start again.
Yeah.
Mix again. I mean, I'm not afraid to do that. If you mix yourself into a corner, sometimes the only way to get out is to start again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not cool to do that as long as there's a deadline.
Right.
It's fine. But yeah, I would say on average about 12 hours. There's some songs, like I've mixed some blues records where it's like live off the floor and all the songs are, the sounds are exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can kind of mix those a little faster. You can mix a record like that in a day.
Right.
But more often than not, because I'm these bigger rock tracks, the sessions are usually kind of big and it takes about 12 hours.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of prep time that goes on before that I'll have an assistant work on, but yeah, I'm in front of it for about 12 hours.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Let's see. So we'll do one more of the pre-submitted here. This one comes from Otlib. Congratulations again on winning Otlib. He's in Biarritz, France. And he says, "Hello, I really like the tone of the main guitar riff. Do you remember what kind of guitar you used and the amp and the pedals?"
I have it.
Yeah, Brian can answer this.
Awesome.
I have it in a text from Steve.
It's a Strat, right? Didn't you say?
It was, yeah, that's right. The main
Nice.
guitar that he played in the room with you guys was a Strat through a divided by 13
Divided by 13.
amp.
The 212 was it?
I think that's what he said.
Yeah,
Like
he has an open back 212 by divided by 13.
Mm-hmm.
I think his Strat. It's
70s.
Yeah, it's a 70s. It's not a 60s Strat.
70s Fender Strat through a divided by 13 FTR 37 amp head and divided by 13 2x12 open back cap.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Interesting, and it's a Strat.
Yeah, right.
And typically, we would use probably a 57 and a ribbon, most likely a Royer.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I don't remember it specifically on that, but I know if it's at Rain's house, it's probably a Royer 121.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think that they would have had that similar thing there.
That's what he said at 50. Well, he couldn't remember the chain at Jackson and Brent.
Right.
But his overdubs, he said, were through, it was a 57 Royer 121 through Neve 500 series pre's.
And I would say that at Jackson's, more likely than not, it would have been through that Neve console.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's cool. Brian, do you remember if those mics were summed down when
No,
you got them, or were they?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I may have done that because I often will do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll find a blend that I like, and then I'll bounce it.
Yeah.
A ton, because a lot of times I'll get like 6 tracks that make up one guitar sound, and it's just too confusing. So I'll print it to one.
Yeah.
But I know they were definitely broken out. It was a 57 and a 121.
Yeah. It's nice to have the flexibility. The
Yeah.
You also hear from guys a lot too. I don't know, like, how fast do you end up kind of combining those mics down to just kind of deal with that guitar sound? Is it something that you're like, let me just, I'm just going to make a decision and move, or do you spend some time?
I do it right away. So I'll like that, even before I start mixing,
Mm-hmm.
even before I have my mix bus, I'll add drum samples if it needs right away, and then I'll take a look at the guitars. Like, I usually start with a balance of everything, so I get a good sort of rough balance, and then I can sort of quickly tell which mics I'm digging on a particular amp. A lot of times it's just blending lots of different amps.
Yeah.
There might be 4 amps that make up one sound, so I'll just find the blend. Sometimes I'll just use one. If it just, especially if the phase is weird, or it sometimes just sounds better to pick the best. Yeah. And other times finding the right blend is what works. But I like to do it early, so that it's stressful to look at a project, especially after I had all my parallel buses, and there's so many tracks that just you don't know where one starts and the next one ends, and it becomes confusing. So it's really just visually I like to treat it that way. And then also too, just from like a computer resource perspective, having one guitar track that makes up a sound rather than 6, I can EQ and process right on that track, and saves computer resources and plugging power.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Let's so for you guys, I think something that would be valuable for everybody to hear. You guys both have home studios, you said? Yeah. So you're both familiar with the process and doing some recording on your own. So when you guys when you work with an engineer, what are maybe some things that you're kind of watching for or hoping that they bring to the table right off the bat? And that could be everything from specifically like, when he goes to mic up your snare and he's got a steep incline on it, are you like, what's he doing? Or are you yeah.
I like to learn as much as I can from anyone.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those valuable things of working with a great producer or a great engineer. It's like you as a musician, your horizons just get expanded by a whole different perspective. So when I started working with Jason later, I was completely excited to come in and be like, this guy is so heavy and does so many big records, and like he knows how to get sounds.
Yeah.
It's like I don't have to use an ear sample because that guy knows how to put the mic on it properly. As long as I do my job.
Right. Yeah.
Not to sound redundant, but the same thing. You should always be learning, and you should always be growing, and not yet let your ego get in the way.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Once that happens, then you shut yourself off from possibilities.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate to work with a lot of great producers and engineers over the years. We learned a lot from our producer Arnold Lanny back in the day. Then when we worked with Bob Rock, that guy got drum tones like that. And then working with Jason was just another great opportunity. I wouldn't have known about that RCA compressor that I love so much if it weren't for Jason. Just people are there. If they're willing to share their ideas with you, then you should mind them. And you can later determine whether you want to adopt them or not.
Yeah. Awesome. How about some tips for guys who are just starting out as engineers in the studio? Are there any points of advice that, as a band, you might give to an engineer, and maybe that has to do with speed or creativity or anything?
Uh, I would say, especially as you're starting out, I don't know, sharing your opinions sometimes when they're not exactly needed
Yeah.
is not a good thing. I think that everybody in a creative environment, if they don't have something specifically to add at that particular moment,
Hmm.
they need to get out of the way of the process, because you always want to be adding to the process, whether it be in a very forward manner or in a subtle way. And you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room to add value.
Right. Right. Very good advice.
I'd also say something I really love about a great engineer is when they can walk in and replicate a sound instead of trying to put their own footprint on a tone. So I think that is
Yeah.
what an engineer should be. It's like if you
Right.
can make a microphone or a combination of microphones sound like that amp in a room, then I feel like you're actually doing your job right. You know.
Right. Right. As opposed to them finding the weirdest, most broken looking microphone and putting it up in front of the amp and being excited. Yeah.
It's cool. Go, but
Yeah.
like, yeah, get
Yeah.
what is actually happening in the room, what the musician's actually trying to translate,
Hmm.
get that translating to the listener.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. And then head down your creative path, kind of a thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so live room. I think that we should probably let these guys do their thing and get back to their days. So why don't we do this? I'm going to ask one more question, and if you guys have anything else, let's get them in right now. We'll maybe take one or two more, and we'll wrap this up. So one more from the live room. We had a couple people ask again about your mix bus brand. So guys, again, like definitely check out those excerpts, check out the articles and Brian's interview video, and um, and then we'll also hit this. So this one comes from the Capsicum Kid, and he asks, do you ever use parallel compression on the mix bus, and do you have multiple tracks going to a parallel compressor, like the mid strong instruments, kind of like Andrew Shep's rear bus kind of vibe?
Yeah. So no, not really on the. Well, like I don't run anything out of my mix bus in parallel,
Mm-hmm.
but I do have the radiator on my mix bus, just working a little bit with the mix knob almost all the way off. So it's just there a little to create a little bit of overall saturation. So I guess in theory that's parallel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Everything else on my mix bus I think is just a hard insert. Um, yeah. What was the second part of that?
If you do something kind of like Andrew Shep's rear bus thing, where you
Oh,
send all your
I
mid
do.
range instruments.
Yeah, I've got an instrument bus that I did, like a back bus that
Mm-hmm.
I do run guitars, keyboards, sort of anything that needs to, a little bit of extra help,
Yeah.
extra fullness. Then definitely I'm using that.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. Let's see, and that one we hit already. So let's do this. I'm going to give the live room another minute or two to get some of those questions in, and if you guys don't mind, I'm going to do a couple quick like housekeeping announcement things for everybody watching. Cool. So real quick, touch on these. There are a couple fun things to talk about. One thing, pro members, you guys all are going to get a copy of our new plugin from process.audio called Sugar. It's available now. It's available for free. So go on the site, make sure that you've redeemed your license for that. Another big announcement for us, we just released a video of Adam Hawkins deconstructing the 21 Pilots song Chlorine. So that's available now. You can go check out that video and hear how they made that song. It's a super, super fun production that was made between the singer from Mute Math, Paul Meany, and Tyler Joseph, the singer for 21 Pilots. So definitely check that one out. It's really, really, really fun. And that song is charting really well right now. In other news, we have a giveaway going on right now with Blue Cat Audio. So you guys can enter to win a bunch of their different plugins. And we also have a masterclass announcement with Andrew Sheps and Greg Wells. That's happening from August 5th through August 7th in Stockholm, Sweden. So there's two ways to attend that thing. You're going to either attend in person, there's in-person seating, and then there's also streaming seats available. So if you can't make it all the way to Stockholm, we have an option for you where you can stream the masterclass and be able to ask them your questions from home. On-site people are going to get to do a little bit more. There's some things where they're going to show some of their bigger sessions that we won't be able to broadcast due to copyright reasons. So they'll be able to kind of see when Andrew and Greg open up some of their biggest productions and break down those tracks for them. So that is also coming up. So let me see if we got anything else from our live room here, and then we'll let you guys get out of here. Okay, all right. So we have a question for Brian. This one comes from John M. Plumley, and he says, how are you dealing with low end, specifically the bass and the kick? Do you ever sidechain your bass and kick so the bass gets pushed out of the way on the kick hits, or do you just EQ some space for each? And I'm imagining like Jason just reaching over and pushing Duncan right now. Like the physical sidechain.
Was invented to amplify the bass.
It's the sole purpose. It's awesome. So the other way, do you duck the kick drum when the bass is playing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
How you answer this?
I rarely sidechain. I actually probably never sidechain.
Choose your words wisely.
When you work with a band like Our Lady Peace that has such a tight rhythm section, like you don't have to do much.
Yeah.
Their parts
Right.
complement each other all the time. There's never an issue, and a lot of it isn't in the playing. It's how they hear each other and play together, and it makes it so easy for me to mix. If I'm working with, not quite a seasoned rhythm section and it needs a little help, what I might do is run the kick and the bass to the same parallel compressor and kind of slam it a little bit, and then that kind of gels them together a little bit more. I'm not really a huge side chain guy. Outside of sometimes like I'll trigger a gate on a snare drum to open and close, side chained off of the snare sample. So that might be one instance where I'll use a side chain if the song needs that, if there's too much cymbal leakage in the snare mic.
Sure.
But a lot of it is just EQing. I think, finding where the kick wants to be. Does the kick want to be like, really, really low end heavy, and then I might cut some low mids where the bass is going to sit nicely and they'll work together. Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to go back. I can't remember what I did on something necessarily, but you just like, if you put the faders up on the rhythm section, it's just really tight.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and that's also part of that thing of like, you're getting it right off the floor, and the instruments are shaped correctly to fit together coming in, and less to do on the other end.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, guys, I think that we should let you get on with your day. Got stuff to mix, and thank you guys so much. This is the first for us where we've had the pleasure of hosting an artist along with the mixing engineer on this, and getting to hear your perspective has been invaluable. So thank you guys so much for taking the time. Brian, thank you for taking the time to come on the site, do the video, do this Q&A. This is absolutely amazing, and I wish I had it when I was starting. So
I love the process. You guys run a great website.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. Guys, tell us what's next for Our Lady Peace.
We have a couple festivals this weekend, and then we're working on a new record right now, and we're heading back out on tour with Live in Bush, kind of third week of July till late September.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then we are bringing a festival back to Canada that we did many, many, many years ago in early mid-September called Somersaults. So we'll be playing 4 or 5 shows in Canada.
Amazing. Awesome. Cool. So lots of shows coming up and a new record in the works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Can't wait to hear it. That's great.
Thank you much. Cheers.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to play us out. Everybody watching, we have a trailer for you on that masterclass that's coming up. So you get to watch that on the way out. And thank you all for tuning in. Again, thank you, Our Lady Peace. Thank you, Brian. This has been a lot of fun. So cool. All right. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
This August, two of the world's greatest engineers, mixers, and producers are teaming up to create a one-of-a-kind workshop where you'll get the chance to interact, ask questions, and watch over their shoulders as they discuss and demonstrate their personal techniques. Join Andrew Sheps and Greg Wells August 5th through 7th in Stockholm, Sweden at Bagpipe Studios on days 1 and 2 and RMV Studio on day 3. You'll learn how Greg and Andrew approach topics like songwriting, producing, tracking, mixing, and any other aspect of the process you can think of. There are 2 ways to attend this workshop. On-site attendees will benefit from the full experience. As an on-site attendee, you'll be able to ask as many questions as you want, meet the mentors in person, enjoy personal feedback, and enjoy the hang. You'll also receive a certificate of completion for this masterclass signed by Greg and Andrew. Streaming attendees will be able to watch the masterclass from the comfort of their own home. We'll be hanging out with you in the live chat room as well as be your voice on site, selecting the most interesting questions to make you feel like you're there. Included with your on-site or streaming seat, there are extra bonuses. Bonus 1, get the session. All attendees will leave with a copy of the session that both Greg and Andrew have worked on during the event. Bonus number 2, free plugin. All attendees will be offered a free perpetual license of Sugar, the first audio plugin created by Process.audio. This is a rare opportunity to learn from 2 masters of their craft over the course of 3 days from the beautiful city of Stockholm, Sweden. Registration is limited for both on-site and streaming seats, so be sure to reserve your seat now, and we'll see you there.